Welcome to Arts and Entertainment Ministries and our series on the 10 Commandments for artists and creative professionals. Now today we're going to look at the 6th commandment. Exodus 20 says this, "You shall not murder." Now how is this commandment related to your art? And how does it really make a difference? Well, give us a few minutes. I think you'll agree it has powerful implications for the art we create and how your art can influence the broader culture. Now this commandment is pretty straightforward. I mean, life is precious. Don't take someone else's life. But at the heart of this commandment, we can all recognize the essential part of a flourishing society is respect for the life and health of others. If life is meaningless, then family, friends, and the society around us are also meaningless. But without a high value on life, everything else will eventually come apart at the seams. So why do we need this commandment? Well, no one is born with the desire to kill others, of course. But ever since sin entered the world, our frustration can lead us down a dangerous path. Pain and anger that are normal to life can turn into bitterness. And bitterness can become a hatred in the heart, and the revengeful thoughts begin to lead to revengeful actions. In the absence of restraint, that hatred can lead to murder. I mean, it's all right there in the Bible. In the very beginning days of Cain killing Abel, all the way to the early church, people becoming martyrs because people who hated Christ took out their rage upon Christ's followers. Now, contrary to some of the squeaky clean art of Christian communities that have had in the past, if we're going to be honest and true about life and death under the sun, we've got to consider these topics in our art, not avoid them. You know, Scripture addresses rape, murder, and the evil of hatred. So we should address them too. The key is to see the difference between the way the culture around us depicts these issues versus the way the Bible depicts these issues. Murder is never glamorized in Scripture. Even when God judged Pharaoh or Jezebel and Nebuchadnezzar, even when we read of God's judgment of Satan, we were never given a picture of God rejoicing in the destruction of others. You know, today we often see that the role of vigilante or the personal vendetta has become a staple of our media diet. And it satisfies us because we want to see justice when we're frustrated it doesn't happen. You know, from Dirty Harry, we have Silence of the Lambs or Inglorious Bastards or Assassin's Creed. There's an online game literally just called Kill the Bad Guy. Amidst the longing for justice, we move from crying out for justice to taking it into our own hands. And somehow, if it's a bad guy, the morality and the sensitivity toward morality is lost, and the preciousness of his or her life is no longer important. This is the real point we need to consider. Whether it is in our heart or in the creative projects we pursue, we should always strive to portray the preciousness of life. There are good examples of this, like Picasso depicting the atrocities of war in Guernica, or the feature film Schindler's List. They're showing the external consequences of taking a life, and that's critically important to the story. Now, there's a famous scene in the Academy Award-winning film Unforgiven by Clint Eastwood. Now, after a young man kills another man, he is still in shock. And they're sitting up on the vista. Clint clearly states that killing someone is a profound thing. You take away all this man's got and all he's ever going to have. The young man tries to take solace by saying, "I guess they had it coming. They were bad guys." Clint Eastwood, in his classic dead serious manner, replies, "We all have it coming." It is in that moment we realize that even a vigilante has to reckon with the consequences of taking a life. In a way, it's a great picture of how Christians can portray a vigilante. We need to remember how God tells us vengeance is His. We were never meant to carry out that kind of justice. Now, to clarify a bit of nuance in the 6th commandment, the Hebrew word for kill here doesn't refer to the battlefield of war. That's an entirely different context. And yet, even with that in mind, King David wasn't allowed to build the temple of God because he had too much blood on his hands, even though it was during war. You see, there's something profound about taking a life that affects our very soul. And this points us to the deeper issue. Both the Old Testament and the New Testament tell us the real problem is in our hearts. We see in Leviticus 19 and in the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew 5, they tell us, do not hate your brother in your heart, don't bear a grudge, or don't take vengeance. In the New Testament, Jesus even tells us to reconcile with others before we come to the temple or go to church and worship. Why? Because the issue at hand is really an issue of the heart, and it affects our intimacy with God. So how can this influence the art we create? Well, there are two basic ways to honor this commandment. One, show the consequences of bitterness, hatred, and murder. And the other is to celebrate the blessing of protecting life, showing how precious it is. So take time to consider how you can create in a way that is more honoring of the life God gives to each of us. In so doing, your ideas and your artistic creations will not only honor God, but also contribute to a healthier society, and that leads to greater human flourishing for everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and click the subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments, just place them down below, and we look forward to continuing the discussion.